Ready to talk about innovation that's changing the world and meet the people that are making it happen? Welcome to the Global Code podcast.
Here, we go beyond the buzzwords, beyond the headlines to uncover the real stories behind technology's global impact.
From AI to clean tech, blockchain to biotech, we are exploring innovations that matter and talking to pioneers driving change in every corner of the world with a focus on people, purpose, and possibility.
Wondering how AI and emerging technologies will shape your future?
Yeah, we're wondering that too.
So we are asking the boldest thinkers and builders we can find.
Come with us on this journey into the heart of innovation across borders and boundaries.
This is Global Code.
Tech for everyone, everywhere.
We are super excited to welcome John Radovan, who is a public sector director at MIT Open Learning, specializing in delivering digital transformation and AI education for large government organizations. He's had a distinguished military career, which includes tours in Germany, Lithuania. He's also been at Amazon and in Guam, Iraq. John played a pivotal role in launching the Department of the Air Force MIT Artificial Intelligence Accelerator in 2019. He led the organization as the deputy director through his retirement from the Air Force in 2023. He has spoken at the NATO War College Ambassador course and co-developed the AI for National Security Leaders course at MIT. And he has 3 beautiful children with his wife, Michelle. And we are super, super, super excited to have you here. I feel very grateful to be able to call you a friend. We met at a conference and saw each other, we beelined it to each other. We're like, all right, we're going to be friends forever now. So
just tell, it was great.
Yes. And you have this incredible background. Tell us more about what's the John story? Where did it all begin?
Yeah. So John's story. So I'm born and raised in South Florida. Prior to joining the Air Force, I'd never gone north of Orlando. And so I'd never seen a winter before. September 11th happened. And I decided to kind of take up the call and enlisted in the Air Force. And so I came in as an E1. That's the lowest rank you can get. Doesn't even have a insignia. It's just blank. And started as a weather technician. And so, weather is one of these interesting career fields when you think about model and simulation. And so, I did weather. It's really an art to do, being able to see stuff in 3D and looking at numbers and kind of seeing how the atmosphere is going to go. But I did that for probably 15 years of my military career. I got my degree while I was in Iraq. I was finishing up my degree. And then I crossed over to the officer side and really got into kind of the program management side of the house. And then I got picked up to do this talent sharing program called Education with Industry, where they take active duty folks and they place them in Fortune 500 companies for a year to work. And so I'm paid by DoD, but I work at the company to learn. And I got selected to go to Amazon, and I worked in their drone program before it was actually released. I did a lot of the flight test evaluation, data collection for their sensitive void system. And while I was there, I went to their internal AI school called Machine Learning University. And it was this idea of, can we take folks out of fulfillment center, folks that aren't familiar with AI, and train them up internally and put them in these types of jobs? And so this was before Amazon announced its investment. I went through the beta piece. And, halfway through there, I kind of looked at my friend who was there. And I said, hey, the Air Force should do this. And so we wrote a white paper saying, hey, Air Force should emulate what Amazon is doing, Machine Learning University, and they should do it at MIT. We did some research. I'd never been to MIT before, but it just was a perfect place to kind of, it was like the center of gravity of AI for the Air Force. and it landed on the Secretary of the Air Force's desk. And I got a call 3 weeks later asking about the paper. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call and asked if I wanted to come to MIT. I was supposed to go to Pentagon to stand up the AI accelerator. And so I was rerouted from Amazon, went straight to MIT, stood up the unit, and retired out of there. And MIT made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and brought me in to kind of do public sector work with the faculty.
Wow, what an incredible journey you've had. So out of where's the fun fact in here? We usually get to a fun fact. I mean, tell us a little bit more about.
So you're familiar with the toy, the yo-yo?
Very familiar, yes.
It was Time Magazine's Toy of the Century. So I am a Filipino, second generation American. My grandfather brought over the yo-yo with other Filipinos when he immigrated early in the 1900s. And it was a toy, and a businessman named Duncan saw my great-grandfather playing the yo-yo with his friends and hired them. And he worked for Duncan Yo-Yo. That's how the yo-yo made it to the U.S. And then he mass produced it. My grandfather traveled all over the world.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. This was during the Depression, all the way up into the 50s. He broke away and started his own company called Royal Yo-Yo. And Duncan sued him on patent infringement on the word yo-yo. He countersued and said it's a common word in Tagalog, went all the way to the Supreme Court in New York, and he won the case. And Duncan actually went out of business because of this. Was bought out by Mattel. And so it was a great story of kind of like immigrant coming over with no money, nobody helping him out. And then, working his way up and kind of building a business out of it. But that's the fun fact is the yo-yo. My grandfather was one of the originators. And if you Google Pepe Radovan, you'll see on there, he's credited with a few other Filipinos on bringing it over.
That's incredible. That is incredible.
What? That's not a fun fact. That's like a Netflix special. Like, what are you?
It's funny you say that. A grad student contacted me in 2006 and said, "Hey, we want to do a documentary on this." And they actually went to the Philippines with me. My first time.
Wow.
We filmed, and we're driving around where my great-great-grandfather grew up in Lukban, in the Philippines. It's on the main island. And we're sitting there on the side of the street, and I look over and I see my name, Radovan, huge letters in a cemetery. It's like, it was the biggest kind of plot in the cemetery. And I walked over there, and there were newspaper articles, all kinds of stuff inside. And the Radovans from the 1800s on through were all buried there. It was kind of neat. The movie never made it out, but it was actually a neat experience.
This is incredible. I mean, ingenuity is clearly part of your family history. And I know that for you, where you come from and your background and sort of like your life story and history is really important in terms of how you view the world and the work that needs to happen now with technology. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, why is technology for the world so important to you?
I think, at least talking from like the AI lens, we're at an inflection point in society where the way humans interact with data and information is just really changing rapidly. And I think where other technologies and stuff that have come up in the past, you think, of the computer kind of changing jobs and basically, it in a way, it kind of started, at least on the American side, the push of inequality, I guess, of workers that used to be knowledge-based workers. Now the computer's doing it, and they're getting pushed down to, lower wage jobs. I think AI has a chance to kind of um, reverse that. And I mean, there's a chance it can happen. Dave Aunter, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's at MIT. He wrote a paper called Applying AI to Rebuild the Middle Class. And it's really interesting just kind of going through there. And so for me, like I started out, at the bottom of the Air Force. I'm not from a super rich family or anything like that, but now I'm at MIT, I'm part of the crowd now. And I just noticed that like technology, Silicon Valley, no offense, they're not solving stuff for the people. And so I know how both worlds work now. And and I think this is one of the things that Salima and me brought us together too, is just kind of like, there's a better way to do this. And, AI, if you think about it, like, Dave Otter used the example of like, nurse practitioners and how technology allowed them to do real expert things that only doctors used to do, and technology enabled to push that down. AI has the ability to kind of now, you think of why healthcare is so expensive. It's because you have these very high knowledge base that can only make these decisions. And now you have this decision-making thing that's pushing stuff down. And so, there's a really chance now to where the middle class can kind of actually be rebuilt. And I think of this globally. I think of the Philippines, where I'm from, out of Asia. It's the most westernized country. They speak English, but most of their economy and the work that they do is manual labor, and they do a lot of work overseas and they send money back. And so I see this as a chance for good, but it's going to take folks that are in this space to kind of realize that and make sure that there's a voice for this for others.
John, amazing story. We do have some commonality here in terms of career, not in terms of being in the Air Force or being part of the yo-yo revolution. But I was also at Amazon. I was part of Machine Learning University. I took courses from Machine Learning University.
Wow.
I'm interested in what you just mentioned. Like, I don't think I've heard anybody say that as to how, actually, it's the other way around. It's the story that we usually hear is AI will like take away everybody's jobs, right? And now you're coming in here and you're like, no, actually, it's going to rebuild the middle class. So I would like to dive deeper into like what sort of use cases you would think would help the middle class. And when I say middle class, I mean like, globally, right? So what it would be good to get your thoughts on the use cases.
Yeah. So, a lot of it revolves around the kind of education. I think that the other thing that AI has done is, and studies have shown this, you can go from something that maybe used to take 9 or 10 months of training, and you can get it in 3 months now. And so it kind of shortens the gap, and, information and content has kind of become commoditized now. It's available freely out there. And so you don't necessarily need now a 4-year degree, which has kind of been the gold standard around the world of kind of getting into these upper echelon jobs and paying and stuff. And so, in one sense, there's been a democratization. I mentioned earlier, like the way we interact with data is changing and stuff. And so, there's a chance. And again, it all depends, man. Technology is neutral, and there are bad things that can happen. We're seeing it in misinformation around the world, in California, in the Middle East. But there's also good that can be done. And I think it's in the job sector, or in jobs for the middle class, in that you no longer need a 4-year degree. I think certificate programs that are way more accessible. And I think we're going to be looking at career fields, especially I look at healthcare, and I think, man, there's a chance now to bring down the cost of healthcare. Again, the major cost of healthcare is because there are only a few people that are out there. And so it's supply and demand that can do these things. And now I mentioned the nurse practitioner piece. I think AI is a decision-making tool. And now we're going to be able to lower down the level of decision-making. And so what it's probably going to do is these folks that really thrived in the last 15 years because they're the only ones that could do it, I think what they're getting paid is going to drop. And I think the bottom is going to come up because now we can bring more workers into like better jobs because they're getting aided in this decision making. We can kind of lower it down. Does it make sense?
Yeah, kind of. It does sound like though there are there is a certain section which is not gonna be happy, and there is a certain section which is gonna be happy. So, and we want it to work for everybody, right? So it sounds like there is a section that's gonna be impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's always winners and losers in technology. The AI has got to be the same, but I think from a decision-making standpoint, because that's where expertise, that's where the money goes, right? You make a lot of money in computer science because there's not a lot of people that are doing it. And so the price is higher. And so AI is a decision-making tool. It's about to, flood the market in a sense. And I think that's good for everybody. But I think the upper echelon folks actually that have been enjoying this, doctors, academia, on the computer science side, I think there's an inverse that's actually going to happen now. And what happened in the computer age where it drifted, this has the potential to kind of close the gap, if you will.
Listen, thank you. I think that honestly, it'd be great if we could kind of close some of the gaps that are happening, right? When you take a look at the exorbitant cost of healthcare, of formal education, and all of these things, it would be great if AI can really play a role to help narrow that and really, to your point, democratize access across multiple realms. I'm curious and just want to take a step back for a minute in terms of, so understanding your career journey, which is phenomenal, by the way, so many just amazing points there. And I think one is just the ability of technology to create opportunities to learn, to allow folks to pivot, right? Because when you think, you mentioned your career path as being in weather, things like that for like 15 years before going into the military, and then taking this course, which literally changed, it seems, the trajectory of your career, which is something made possible by the technology itself. Right. And so that's one. And then two, wanted to kind of tie it up a little bit and make sure that our listeners understand what you're responsible for now as director of public sector. So we could just talk about those two things.
Yeah. So I'll hit the second one first. And so MIT as an institution has a long storied history of working with defense. In fact, America probably wouldn't have won World War II if it wasn't MIT with, encryption and missile defense stuff during the Cold War. All of that was built out of MIT. Lincoln Laboratory, which is a federally funded research and development center. That's huge. That's out of MIT. And so MIT has always had this very strong history and relationship with defense and the federal government. I think I'm over at Open Learning. And the neat thing about open learning is that our mission is to transform teaching and learning at MIT and around the globe through innovative use of digital technologies. And so, are you familiar with MOOCs and OpenCourseWare? So that came out of MIT and Harvard. And so I work at Open Learning that's part of MIT. And that's really what we're about. We have JWell that works with the colleges. My boss in Brazil runs RAISE, which is Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education. And they provide free stuff and support educators around the world and domestically in the US. And so, as AI has, so how do I say this? So being at MIT, you get to see, it's almost like seeing into the future a couple of years and kind of what's going on. And everybody is seeing the writing on the wall with AI. And so there's just a big push on saying we need to work with the government. They need our help in kind of understanding these things. And so because of my background, I understand how the government works. There's a decorum to get things through. I know how to read through the bills and see, who do we need to talk to, and understand that. We do a lot of workforce training with the Department of Defense. So we're training 2.8 million people on the fundamentals of AI right now, and a bunch of other federal agencies. And so I kind of help manage those relationships and looking for opportunities for us to, engage, whether it's through speaking, whether it's through training. But how can we partner up? And we're increasingly doing this internationally too. What was the first question? Sorry.
Sure. The first question was really more so related to how technology itself really allowed you to pivot your career.
Yeah.
And so sorry, it's just interesting because it helped you to yourself pivot, and now it's something that you're helping others to do by bringing them up to speed, it sounds like, as well. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I think, again, even in the last few years, how stuff has kind of really changed real fast once OpenAI opened up ChatGPT to the world. I'm the first male in my family to actually graduate from college on both sides. And so college was a real important thing for me. It opened up a lot of doors. But as I mentioned before, kind of with AI, you don't actually need a whole degree in it to work in this field. There are many different levels. Obviously, you're going to be a computer scientist. Like there's always going to be a need for that. And so Amazon taking these courses really opened up my eyes and kind of put me on that path from a technology standpoint. I think, for me, and I think for many others, the hardest thing to find in the AI space right now is domain experts and that understand how AI works. Data scientists, they're just looking at the data. It's fields. A lot of folks that are working on projects have no context in kind of what the data is that they're doing. And so what the Air Force did with me and what the DoD is doing is saying, let's take functional experts in, so we did a project on synthetic aperture radar and style GANs. And so synthetic aperture radar, people aren't familiar. It's an all-weather sensor that can be from space or an aircraft. It can see through everything. But it's very hard to kind of interpret what the image is and what's below. And it takes, 5-10 years for folks to like look at that and go, that's a tank, that's a house. And so what we did is we did a project where we took a tech sergeant from Intel that specialized in SAR data. We stuck him at MIT with a research team that says, can we take style GANs and take this SAR image and create a synthetic image that's in a electro-optical, which is what you would normally see in a satellite that anybody can interpret. And so to answer your question, I think and that's where I see a lot of promise when I talk about middle class and people moving over, is having some formal skill and then now being able to have an aid to make decisions at a higher level. And so it was so great for the team to have this actual expert that can tell them about this data set, the decisions that's made off of it, how they think about it, and work with it. And so I think that's how kind of I got into it, is just taking my understanding of of military operations and then getting up to a certain level. I wouldn't view myself as an expert, but I know how things work, and I know enough to be dangerous. And so I see that opportunity for everybody else. I mean, literally, I was in Amazon for 10 months. And next thing you know, I'm over at MIT and we're doing deep research into a whole bunch of different projects around AI.
I love that whole concept. I'll kick it over to Salima, but I love that whole concept. It's almost looking at AI as almost an API to career development and career growth, right? It provides this this tool that it kind of allows a plug and play for a language that you may not necessarily speak and things like that, but it gives you access to it.
So the promise is there. I mean, now it's just, you go to a website and it could be in German, it translates to English. And so now a lot of English literature can be translated instantly on a web page, and now you can read it. And so like there's good in technology, and I'm an optimist, and I think we need to kind of, there's a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of bad things can and do happen with it. But I try to just kind of focus on the positive.
Yeah, I love that about you, and I think we all share that on this podcast for sure. That sense of optimism and hope. The one thing I want to throw back at you is I hear you on the sort of the opportunity side of it, but one thing that I'm curious about from your perspective, especially because you've straddled many worlds now. You've been on the tech side, you've been in government, you're in academia. What is the sort of strategic level change that needs to happen in order to really mobilize the kind of thing that you're talking about, right? Because it just feels like, I mean, you are exceptionally insightful, and I'm sure as are a lot of people that you work with. And, I've seen failure happen so many times because people just don't know how to connect those pieces together.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. For me, when I was the deputy director at the accelerator, I mean, I thought about that a lot. And what the conclusion that I came to was it's about education. I think that, I use a biblical examples. Everybody sees the writing on the wall, the hand of God saying this is changing, but everybody's interpreting it a different way. And I think that's an issue is, especially in computer science and AI, words matter. And so I think, from a level setting perspective, I think that the foundations and fundamentals should eventually be something that we train everybody on, from K through 12. And in fact, we're doing that with MIT, working with K through 12 organizations. And so for me, it's all about education, because once you realize what it is, like what it really is and how it works, I think the doom and gloom goes away, and you understand what you should use it for and what you can't. I mean, look at the ethical, discussion points and areas around AI. It's usually at the application layer and the output layer. And inevitably what happens, it happened in the US with facial recognition.
Right.
People were just using this thing wrong. And it wasn't that the AI system was racist. It's that the training data it was trained on wasn't matching the decision you were trying to get on the output side of the house. And so I think for me, it's all around training. It's around, upskilling, whatever word you want to use. I think it's about understanding how it works, because once you're under the hood, it's not as scary anymore. And I think you could be real practical about how to use it, how to think about it. Your mental models change.
Yeah, I think that like one thing as you're talking is just making me kind of bringing this up again for me is that, I think earlier you said that, technology is neutral. And I don't think actually that it is neutral at all. I actually think that it's very much built, it's inherited all the stuff that, all of the things that we've learned or haven't learned about the world and how we've interacted or haven't interacted with the world. That goes into the design, right? That goes into how these technologies end up becoming what they are. But to your point, we're often looking at the application side where we see, oh, right, this is having a negative effect or this is having a negative impact. And I do think that part of maybe the opportunity here, especially because now, ethics and responsibility is something that's talked about more and more than I've ever heard when it comes to technology, especially with AI. There is an opportunity to really think about things early on in the stage of as we're developing products or technologies, right? To make sure that it's, we're ensuring the goodness of it at the front end and not just at the sort of application end. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've many conversations with friends who are experts in this space, going back and forth, and AI forces is tough for humans because they face a level of explicitness that we don't impose on other people, right? And so take admissions. They'll have the person has in their mind on what the class deal or what they're looking for, but it's not written anywhere and it's not down. When we have an algorithm, you have to, algorithms force a level of explicitness in our decisions that humans don't like to have. And so in a way, I think that it's forcing these discussions because the human mind is fickle and it's not explainable like machines in a way. And so I think that's where I think these interesting conversations that we probably wouldn't have had if AI wasn't in the discussion. And that's been going on for centuries and the way people have been thinking and stuff. And so in that matter, I think that's it's been very helpful in there.
But I think part of this is what you're saying, because this is what I'm hearing you say. Part of it is that we haven't had to get messy with technology in the sense that we really haven't asked the question whether technology was going to take over our lives in the way that we are sort of at this precipice where we're saying, oh my gosh, is AI going to take over human brains and minds and experiences?
Right.
And I think that humans have to inherently deal with the messy, right? But we've sort of given technology a break. And I think what's happening now is people are saying, no, if AI is what it is now and is going to become more than what it is now, then it's going to have to figure out how to deal with the messy, which means that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with the messy.
Right.
And I don't know that we've always been good at that.
Yeah. So we haven't historically humans have.
Right.
I think that one of the beefs that I have two major beefs with the nerds and the PhDs in computer science. One is the naming of things. Computer vision. Computer vision does not work like human vision. And so you automatically get a bad mental model of what the heck is going on with it, right? And so when they say, what's the word that they use for the large language models when it gives it that answer? What's the word?
The hallucination?
Oh yeah, a hallucination. It's no, this is a feature, not a bug, right? In how your system is built. And so in one way, the words that they're choosing make sense to the community, but they're confusing everybody else. And I think that's leading to some of the panic, right? They should not name it computer vision. We shouldn't say hallucinations. It's making it seem like it's a sentient being that's having a hallucination. It's not. The other thing that I have a problem with is that they're testing this out in the wild. And it's the humans that are paying for it, right? And this started with, Elon Musk and Tesla and self-driving cars. Again, great technology, nothing work, but they tested it on us, right? The large language model companies are doing the same thing right now. There's no regulation. In the US, I think it was a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember the case with Zillow, it lost hundreds of millions of dollars. It was basically, they thought they had asymmetric information on housing. And, they would give you an estimate of what the house is worth. And they said, whoa, we think that we can now automate buying for flipping houses and we can make a lot of money off of this. And so they automated this thing. And the part of the population they tried this out on is what some would call starter homes, right? And so they've artificially raised the price of a lot of these things. And then they had a real solid machine learning team. And, you know, they let the thing go and they automated it. But the problem is that prices will not always infinitely go up nonstop. And so then they lost a lot of money. They closed down the division. But who was left? People like my sister couldn't afford the house anymore because it ran up 200% because this algorithm was sitting there and they didn't tell anybody about this and people were bidding. And then it eventually bit them in the butt, but Zillow just wrote off a loss on its taxes. And so these big tech companies that are kind of putting out in the wild, I don't think there's enough enough of the burden is put on them, kind of how they're testing it right now in society. Like that's one point that I do not agree with is how that's going on right now. I don't think it's helping anybody but the companies that are kind of refining and building up their models.
But John, so there are some things that you mentioned where which kind of resonated with me. It's like the terminology just sounds too complex, right? The reason I took machine learning classes was when two data scientists would talk, I would not understand a single word they were saying, like literally a single word. I was like, am I in tech? Like, what's going on here? So they were like, oh, features, and I forgot even their terms now. But there were a lot of jargon, right? And it makes sense to them because they are in the field. But I would argue that everybody is like that in the sense that they don't want to learn how AI works, to be honest. People just want to use it, right? Like you don't want to learn how your car works, you just want to drive it. So is the opportunity for education teaching people how AI works or using AI based on some common use cases, right? Like one example you mentioned was translation, translate one image to another. The other use case is doing their existing jobs faster, right? Or doing some things which they never could do. Like a good example would be, and this was recently, like came across this where I think a father, like his child had a very unique sort of medical issue, and there was no medicine out there, and because it impacted only like 0.01% of the people in the world, nobody really looked at it. So out of desperation, like he went out and he basically used LLM, and he figured out that illness was the same category as Alzheimer's. Then he looked up all Alzheimer's research and he was able to pattern match or tell AI to give it a match as to what can work in, the ailment that his child had. And he emailed all the researchers telling them, hey, you know what, your research can help my kid. So, so in that case, I don't think the father cared how LLM did it, but he cared about what it did with the information. So, long story short, would you say that the education should not be around how AI works rather than what you can do with it? Because I feel like there's more impact there.
Yeah. So I'm going to push back a little if people don't want to know. I think that's a very Western thing, especially in America. There's a hubris going on, around that. Look what happened with Hong Kong before China came in, and that whole population knew how to evade the computer vision stuff. They were doing all kinds of things, messing with those systems and stuff. And so, like, I think, it really depends where you're at. I think developing countries especially are inquisitive about it. And so I'll push back a little bit on that. But to your point, the way I think the training piece, maybe I should have clarified, right? So I'm like, I don't think people need to, get into learn. Everyone needs to learn Python and needs to learn how to, build a neural network. What we do at Open Learning and through one of the organizations that we're at Horizon is we think in terms of like mental models. And so mental models around AI is where I think that's where you're going with this too is, you don't need to understand the specifics, but mental models is what humans use to just, accelerate learning real fast. You understand how it works. That's why I think education is so important is because people are coming in with, AI superpowers and that's their view of AI. And so, I really think it needs to be around mental models so you can notionally know how it works, right? So, take computer vision. Now that if you know that it's not seeing like human vision and that it's really just pixelizing everything, assigning values, and that's what it's doing, right? Oh, okay. The system isn't racist. Oh, I should use it for this, but I definitely don't want to use it for this. I can automate this task, but this one I still need, I want them to chime in, the system to chime in, but I want to make that decision myself. That's what I mean around is kind of like just understanding how it's working from a mental model standpoint. I think everybody needs to learn. And then I eventually think, I have a high schooler. I'm like, you learn computer language. That's the only thing I require of him. Or you can do whatever you want, but you will learn computer language. And so, I think computer language is another thing that we need to think about again, because AI is making this happen so quickly. You may not need to, like right now, people who know 10 languages may be very valuable. That may be going away because the system can do it right now. Right. And so, that's where I think at, and I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I would say so. It sounds like, there is always going to be people who would want to dive a little bit deeper. And there are some people who would be like, hey, I just want to drive the car. Right. So, but, I do want to ask this question, though. I think we discussed, like all three of us to discuss this. So how do we help, underserved communities who may not even have the laptops or desktops in their home, right? Which might be the case for a lot of non-US or non-Western countries. How do we help them get access to the learning platform or whatever you're talking about?
Absolutely. We deal with a lot in open learning for this. JWell's one of the organizations I said that works with university, and then there's Raise. And so I think, the way MIT and open learning and through Raise is tackling it is they're building out curriculums and they're putting them out there for free. And then we're going to these places and we're calling it the Day of AI. And we go around and we train hundreds, sometimes thousands of educators. We say, here are all of the tools. We're here to support you. Here's how you can deliver this where you're at. We have the App Inventor was built out of MIT. That's used heavily in a lot of this stuff. And so I think providing the resources and meeting people where they're at, and we got to support them. And so it's not as simple as just like sending a laptop over. It's support and having a place where these folks, especially on the education side, where they can do it on their own. And I think that's important is kind of building that piece. And yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing. I'm actually going to the Philippines. We're going to do a Day of AI there next month. I'm really excited about. But that's one way that I think we can support these communities is supporting the education, the education ministries, and providing them this stuff and then teaching them.
I'm curious about what the reception has been from educators and administrators in this space. It's something that I know is so fast moving. So on a certain level, it must seem just intimidating. especially for some of the educators, because some of their kids probably understand it better than they do.
Right.
So how's the reception been?
I mean, for the K through 12, thank you. Because they don't have this expertise. And you gotta just these people have their own jobs that they're doing and they're being tossed over the fence, these things, right? Or they're trying to build on their own. And so it's actually been open arms on the academic side saying, thank you. This is really helpful. And this is something that we could use, we could do on our own. And so I think it's overwhelmingly been very positive. I on a university level, the MIT doesn't view it this way, but there's competition back and forth and stuff like that. And so some, on the college level may not be as willing to kind of play. But I think on the K through 12 side, both domestically and abroad, it's been, yes, please come. And we do this for free too.
No, this is incredible. And so before we sign off, Salim, I definitely want to make sure that we understand or help districts and teachers understand how to get connected and engaged and access as well, because I think it's incredibly important work. So Salim, I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, definitely. I had just one more thought for you, John, as you were talking, and I realized that this whole education piece, it sounds distinctively different than like maybe technology education courses that might have happened in the past, or like movements to like educate people on, I don't know, like cell phones and how they work and all of that. We're talking about something else. I feel like what you're saying, one of the things that you're saying is that 20 years down the line, we don't want to be in a position where we say AI just happened to us.
Right.
And not be able to actively engage with where it's going. And I feel like that is also what you're talking about. So it's not just like the mental, I think the mental model piece the framework is very useful in that sense, right? Because with mental models, we're also thinking about like, where do we sit relative to something? Like, what is our relationship to the thing? And I think that what you are maybe helping people do, whether they realize it or not, is empowering them to really think about technology, and people talking about it as a co-pilot or a co-partner, whatever, however you want to term it, right? That you have an active relationship with this thing that is literally not just going to be like the car that moves you, but it's going to be a thing that makes decisions for you, right? Whether that is through an insurance company or a healthcare app or the government, right? And it just feels like we're at a new place of understanding that I don't know we've had to have in the past.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons. I mean, at Sloan at the business school at MIT, they call it general purpose technology. And I think there's only been, I don't know how many. I think less than 100 where they actually said these are general purpose. Electricity was one. So it's almost like a horizontal thing. So it affects everybody. Right now, the gatekeepers are academia and industry, and then to a certain extent, government, right? But they're talking to academia and industry because they don't have the expertise internally to go do this. And so they're the ones that are driving a lot of this right now. And that's why, where I grew up, how I was raised, and just, I'm first from two worlds. I've seen how this has changed my stars, right? Like, it's crazy how it just pushed me up, economically and where I'm at. And so I see the value in that. And I think, everybody here that's on the podcast and others that are leaders in these areas, I think there's a duty for us to speak up and make sure that the diversity is there. And it's not diversity for diversity's sake, so we have it. It's that because the technology is touching everything, you need people from different communities to chime in, because the people creating it have no idea. And right now it's a build it and they'll come type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think if we start doing that education piece and we start bringing people in to understand, I think we're going to get better applications. I think that will have less ethical concerns. Certainly, bad things are going to happen with this, and they're already happening. But I just feel a duty for myself to say, "Hey, wait a second," because I'm in a lot of these meetings, right? And say, "Hold on, we need to consider this. This is, what are we doing about this?" And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I come to almost 21 years in service, and so what drives me is impact. That's why I'm at MIT. That's why I'm at Open Learning. And so it's important for everyone to speak up. And again, not for diversity's sake. It's just, it will actually be better. You'll make more money because you'll build something that people like, right? And then people will understand how it works. And so we can make it where everybody makes out a little bit better, I think.
Well, we love that you have this commitment, and this vision for making sure that the world is empowered through technology and not disempowered. And I think that's kind of where I feel like, you are pushing all of us in that direction. So thank you so much. Will you come back again is my question. Will you come back again and talk to us?
For you, of course. I told you, I normally don't like to be public. I like to be I like to be right in the background. It's but absolutely.
We need more leaders. We need more leaders out there like you, because I'm sure that there are a lot of young ones that are going to hopefully listen to this. And if they don't, their parents will and say, "Hey, you need to go check out John. He's really cool." And he comes from this whole history of yo-yo-ness that nobody knew about. So that is super, super, super cool. So you're like rad. The rad in the Radovan is real.
Great.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you about our episode. Please leave us comments, likes, share as much as you can and want. And we look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our jam session, post-conversation with John Radovan. All right. So thoughts, ideas, where did you go in this conversation?
Well, I'm going to call it, I think that was the funnest fun fact that we have had. Yeah. I was so interesting. I was like, let's make the podcast about that. But forget AI. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to seem controversial, but I kind of was left wanting a little bit because in the beginning, John made a comment about how I guess the middle class is going to grow. And I was kind of wanted to get more on that, but I feel like I missed or we couldn't get there. That was a little disappointing. And then, but in terms of what he said about education, definitely, education is the first step. But what I can tell you from personal experience is the reason I took the machine learning courses was because I felt like I would lose my job. So otherwise, I was never going to take it. And I feel like that's 95% of people out there, they're not going to learn something which not going to threaten them in some shape or form. But I do see a lot of opportunity in terms of hey, I just want to use AI for writing a book, or I want to use AI to make it faster for me to market stuff, right? So I feel like the use cases are still really compelling, where you can say, hey, if you do this, you will earn, you can do a side income and you can do a gig. You can be a gig worker. So I do see a lot of opportunity there. And I feel like the education aspect should be focused there rather than how AI works, because I feel like that market is smaller, but it is definitely important for kids, right? So I was not thinking about young children or kids in college or school. For them, yes, that's important, like whatever John mentioned, but people who are actually a threat, who are people working right now who don't have time to study, for them, I feel like the applications would be more compelling.
Well, I would think about it in life cycles.
Yeah.
So to your point, Ashish, I think that there's multiple use cases and targets and needs based on that. So we need people to kind of learn about it and learn how it works because it's so nascent that there's still a huge opportunity to shape what it looks like, right? So you need a population of people who are understanding it in depth and understanding what it takes to create craft and shape because again, it because it's so nascent, you can literally just direct where it's going a bit, and it's still malleable, right? It's not set yet. But then, yeah, for your everyday practical purposes, just understanding the actual applications is huge, right? Understanding how it can increase your knowledge about things you want to learn about, understand how it helps you to run your business more effectively, efficiently. How it can help you with thought partnership and things like that. To me, that's a different segment of folks that is also huge and very real. But I think both things are true.
Mm, yeah. It did make me think about like what kind to both of your points, like what kind of education is really needed in this whole like world of AI, and I just feel like it's um like to become AI literate, right? Whatever that means. Like there's to both of your points, like there's the application piece, right? And then also to your point that there is the piece around there are people who definitely want to know how it works, the ins and outs of how it works. But I guess what I'm thinking about is like in some kind of like, I don't actually believe there's a dystopian future, to be clear. Everybody should know that that's not what I'm saying. But let me just be a little sci-fi for a second. That if we're going to like imagine like again 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, right? Like who needs to know what in order for us to actually shape a future with AI or any other technology in a way where we're ensuring that it actually is going to work for us as humans, right? In service of us and in service of the planet and in service of greater humanity. And I think in that sense, then the question around education really does become, it's more complex, right? Because I think the kinds of education, for example, that people who are at the forefront of machine learning and AI, by the way, those are not you and me, right? Those are the people that are sitting in the tech companies, in the engineering orgs that are building the thing, right? They have a different level of education that is required, and they too require it, by the way, right? Whether it's around ethics or responsibility or whatever it is, like they are operating in a different place and in a different capacity of responsibility to this technology than a layperson that's walking down the street. So I think in some ways I think there is a broader question of what kind of literacy is required across the board. Um, so that what's the end goal that we're trying to get to through that education? And I don't know that it's just about like knowing the tech or understanding it. It's really about what outcome do we want at the end of the day?
Hmm.
And what kind of education and literacy and capacity building or capability building is allowing us to get to that outcome. And we may not all agree on the outcome, right? Some people might be like, yeah, let AI take over everything in my life except chewing gum, and they're happy. I don't know who chews gum anymore, by the way, but anyway, that that could be one version of it, right? And somebody else might say, hey, we want a world where genuinely like I'm able to use AI in the best way possible so that my life is more efficient and I can focus on other things, right? So like whatever it is, but I definitely think it's a broader question of where are we trying to get to with the education, really,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
What I can tell you is in my household we want AI to do the dishes, right? So uh, so so that's what like I would think that people who have day jobs think about, right? They're like, oh, if it would do my dishes, that would be great. Oh, if it can file my taxes, that would be great. So and to go back to what education, like I don't know, if when I say the word education, I think if there is a room of 100 people, maybe like 5 people will be excited about that, right? They'll be like, "Oh, okay, great. There's one more thing I have to do now." But going back to what Shadan said, Shadan, you said you can shape AI, right? So let me ask you this: would it be using AI and giving feedback? Is that not also a good way to shape how it evolves?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to your question, given the feedback in terms of the development, Yes. But that's it's not the same as developing, right?
Right.
And so, especially given the focus of the podcast in terms of really global impact, we should want as many different types of folks sitting around that table actually doing the developing as possible, as opposed to just getting folks giving their thoughts on how it's being developed, right? Because even that, the feedback is interpreted and then possibly implemented, as opposed to just firsthand implementation. So that's all. I think I don't disagree with you. I think most folks are hyper practical and what can this do for my everyday life, and in terms of what changes does it make. I also think that there's a unique opportunity to show people the power of understanding it in a way that can help improve the future, in unforeseen and at this point just unknown ways, which is incredibly exciting. So
Yeah. And I think also, Shaden, like what I'm hearing you say, and tell me if I'm overextending your point, but is that like, again, if AI is going to be and is going to continue to be the co-pilot, quote unquote, in our lives, right? In a way where we haven't really, I don't know, a lot of people have thought about AI in that, or technology in that way in the past. We've kind of just used our phones, right? We've used our computer, but how many people have walked around going, this is my co-pilot in life? Like, no. I mean, I definitely didn't. And I was just at a conference in November, and I asked this audience of like 1,000 people, I said, okay, I was on the panel. I said, how many of you have thought of AI as a co-pilot? Do you know how many hands went up? 0 in 1,000 people.
mhm.
0. So, I mean, the point is that we really are at a new point, right? So I love what you're saying, because it's kind of like, again, I do think that the people that are shaping the AI, again, if we're talking about sort of like the more core technology, that is a very exclusive group of people sitting in North America at technology companies. It's not even academia. Academia is doing like 20% of it. Technology companies are doing 60% of it, right? But that doesn't mean that's going to continue to be, that should not be the future that we want, right? The future that we want is what you're describing, right? Which is where the technology is built by more and more people. But there's going to be a lot more than education than just education, right? That's going to get us there,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
the technology itself allows for that. And so we just need to help people understand the power that they have and the ability and the access that they have to actually do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Salima, maybe the conference attendees thought that if they raised their hands, they might be called up on stage. So maybe that's why
They
they
were nervous. You come up.
Tell us more, please. Show us how it works right now, real time, user experience. All right.
This
Well,
was a great session.
this was good. Yeah. Thanks all. Thank you to everyone for listening. Like I said, please share, please like, please comment. And if you don't like, that's fine too. We just want to hear from you, and we'll see you in our next episode. Bye.
Take care.